My husband revealed something to me and I feel powerless. Our wedding is a few months off, but I want to state I have no issue delaying it at all. He, Nick, was my best friend long before we started dating, and he's been there for me when I was going through stuff, too. I lost my job due to layoffs in 2020, and it was an office job I was hoping to move up in. I had been there for a few years, but COVID-19 did a number on the company, leading to many of us being released. I started as an intern, which destroyed me when I was released. Nick was there for me when it happened and was amazing, and he helped me apply for other jobs, too. I moved back in with my parents after rent became too high. I lived alone then, but he spent so many nights applying together and texting me about job openings. And on other nights, he'd bring snacks, flowers, or movies to get my mind off it in the early stages. Eventually, I found a new job, and he even sent flowers as a surprise one day because I was nervous and uneasy about starting over. I brought him games and concert tickets, after finding work, to try and give back after how he helped me through that time, and I feel we became closer because of it. The reason I'm writing this is because of a recent conversation. We have been looking for apartments for the past few months, but he told me we needed to talk. We talked 2 days ago, but I'll give some context first. He has had no contact with his parents since he was 18 when he moved out with a roommate and roommate's then girlfriend. We both attended a Christian school, and I knew his parents were overly strict with him back then. He was even hit for keeping friends they didn't like, and he had wanted to move out for some time. His roommates were 2 years older than him, and he stayed with them for almost 2 years until they became engaged and wanted to move elsewhere. And Nick had a job to rent a room by that time. His roommates are great friends with us, and they even prolonged moving out together until Nick was ready. But when he wanted to talk, it was about his parents. I didn't know what he wanted to talk about, but when he said his parents, I was a little surprised. He seemed uncomfortable from the start, too, but he said he wanted to apologize for something, too. When I asked what for, he said he should have said it earlier but that he was afraid of losing me. He also called himself selfish and was hard on himself, but he said he wasn't sure if he'd be able to satisfy me because he hated himself, among other things. When I asked him why, he said he did before high school and was getting anxious leading up to our wedding. He told me that his parents made him feel that way, and he also reached out to a therapist who suggested being honest with me. His parents were strict about purity growing up, and I knew that, but this was the first time he was specific because he was ashamed of telling anyone. He said he even struggled to tell the therapist. His parents hit him for finding stains in his laundry when he was as young as 13. They told him that that was the same as committing adultery. They also told him that giving himself a hand would destroy his family and future marriage, and they would have random checks of his bed sheets and laundry. He eventually got around them by doing laundry at night. Still, they also put a camera in the bathroom to make sure he wasn't choking the chicken, too, and he said they had a video of him shaking hands with the milkman along with using the restroom. They also used to check his private area randomly, and he began to sleep on his back because he felt guilty for feeling pleasure while he slept. He improved as he grew older, and we've made out many times. He also previously said he wanted to save intimacy for when we were married. He is not religious now, but admitted it was because he was afraid of letting me down. After all, he was convinced he'd never get married. When I asked him why he thought that, he said he read about purity ruining intimacy and was afraid of not being enough. I told him I loved him regardless of anything and was so sorry for everything he told me. I also told him that I didn't think less of him for not saying it, until reaching out to a therapist, because it was really difficult, and I told him that it was good to reach out to a therapist, too. However, he believes he'll never overcome it and that people like him shouldn't get married. I tried to tell him to not be so hard on himself and that I thought nothing less of him too. If anything, I said I thought more of him for reaching out for therapy. But he said he was miserable because everyone said he had great parents growing up and that they wouldn't believe him. He recorded some of the lectures/punishments his parents gave him, on his phone, but believed it wasn't enough to do anything legally. He also said he was unsure of pursuing it, and breaking no contact, and was debating working on himself with his therapist instead. I told him the choice was his and that I'd support whatever he wanted. But I felt that my words couldn't make him feel better even when I hugged him because of everything he went through. I don't know how to make him feel better, so I ask for help. It's not about the wedding, I want to help him. I'm considering postponing it indefinitely so that it doesn't make him feel anxious or rushed, and I honestly don't care when it happens. I want him to get past the belief that people raised on purity shouldn't get married, as he said, and I don't care how long that takes. But aside from suggesting postponing, is there anything else I can say or do? We hung out at his place yesterday, but we just watched TV, and he wasn't ready to talk about it again. He said we could in a couple of days, but he was quiet and just wanted to chill yesterday, and he has another therapy session. I appreciate any suggestions, and if you read all of that. My husband revealed something to me and I feel powerless. The main thing I wanted advice on was what to do with the upcoming wedding. I had no issues delaying it and figured it would be better to postpone indefinitely for 2 reasons. He mentioned having anxiety as the wedding drew closer, still a few months out, along with the real reason he wanted to wait until we were married before having intimacy due to his fears about not being enough and that people like him shouldn't get married. The second reason was that he recently sought therapy, and I didn't want to rush that progress based on a wedding date. I tried to tell him I was more than okay with postponing but feared it coming off the wrong way. As someone commented, I didn't want it to sound like I was having second thoughts. Someone else said there wasn't much I could do to make him feel better aside from telling him I believed him, which can sometimes do a lot. We chilled at his place and watched TV the day after we talked. He didn't want to talk about it that day. He said we could in a few days and eventually spoke about it again. He told me that there was another thing he didn't mention when we first spoke, and it was about his parents. When they would do their random checks of his private areas to make sure he wasn't cupping the carrot, they would touch it to look for dried semen when he didn't want them to, and that was in addition to underwear/sheet checks, too. He said he was 12 when he first remembered it happening and that they did that for a few years. Like the other night, he struggled to tell me and said he worked to tell his therapist in the beginning. She was the one who told him to talk to me and be honest. I decided to tell him that I wanted to offer to postpone in case it was making him anxious and not to rush his therapy progress, and he was happy that I asked because he said he didn't feel he was improving at all. He's been in no contact with them since he was 18, and he wasn't sure about pursuing it legally because he wasn't sure if he wanted to reopen contact/drama with others as he believed they'd tell their church. He received flack for going no contact from a few people from church who reached out to him. He also hated how everyone said he has great parents at church because he knew they wouldn't believe him, so he never told anyone there. I mentioned in my first post that we met in a Christian high school that we both attended, and we are not religious at all now. My only question from here is how to help/encourage him beyond saying I believe him when he feels he's making no progress. We agreed to postpone indefinitely, but that is my last question because it's been challenging, albeit nowhere near as hard for me as for him.
My husband revealed something to me and I feel powerless. I'm mostly making this because many people have asked how we were doing and provided some helpful advice, and this will be the last time I update this. I don't have much in the way of an update besides his conclusion. He's still with his therapist but still doubts his progress and says he struggles not to get stuck in the past. For that reason, he was unsure about pursuing anything legally with his parents due to uncertainty about reestablishing contact after being in no contact for so long, and he doesn't know how his mental health/potential trauma would react to that. As a reminder from my previous post, people from his parents' church tried to reach out when he initially went no contact with his parents at 18. Some were rather condescending and said he didn't appreciate having awesome parents from what little they saw on the outside. Due to the fear of not knowing how he would mentally handle potentially breaking no contact in hopes of anything legal, he decided not to pursue it and instead stick with therapy. He's been with the same therapist since my last post, although he doubts the results. I told him that effects don't happen overnight and that I'd support him regardless of what he chose, and we're in no rush to get married because of everything he's trying to overcome. He's been a bit depressed from time to time despite therapy, but someone commented that some things you don't overcome but instead learn how to carry, and I think that that'll take time in this case because of everything he's been having for a long time. Some people suggested intimacy counseling, which I'm also looking into for the future, but the priority is helping him overcome this first. I never considered intimacy therapy until someone suggested it here, so I appreciate all the advice. I didn't want to go to anyone in real life for advice on something so sensitive, so being able to do it here anonymously helps.